you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we're going to have a great discussion. We're going to talk about de-escalating versus use of force. So de-escalation versus use of force is going to be a great dialogue, especially with today's environment. You know, I mean, it seems to me there's a priority with de-escalation, and it's like we really have to justify above and beyond why we had to use force. And this is going to be a great discussion, a lot to give out here, a lot to learn from my end. So today we're going to bring on Russ Hamilton, who's always my expert when it comes to anything use of force. Hey, Russ, what's going on, man? Can you give us some updates on Keepers of Chaos and Tough Mudder?
Absolutely, Anthony. It's great to be here on the show again. Great to be having this dialogue. Just for a little bit about myself, those of you that don't know me, my name's Russ Hamilton. I'm former sergeant with California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I have a little bit of knowledge and expertise with regard to juveniles as well, and run a Facebook page called Keepers of Chaos. We do training, we do content, we do history, we do lots of fun stuff there. We're going to be doing a team event at a Tough Mudder coming up in Lake Tahoe sometime in June or July, and that's about it for me.
Well, I'll tell you something right now. Social media is growing, guys. If you're new to the profession, if you're in the profession, or even if you're out and you just want to give back, man, social media has really given us a really good platform. Facebook groups like Keepers of Chaos, but also YouTube channels like Tier Talk. A very good community, a lot to learn. We didn't have that when we were coming in. So it's great to take advantage of this, just what we've accomplished so far as a community. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor when we come back. Let's talk about de-escalation versus use of force. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, then we're back. Hey, Russ, let's first give out the generalized definitions for both terms. Let's, you know, in just your version, your definition, what exactly is use of force? When should it be employed? And then what exactly is it when we talk about de-escalation?
Okay, just keeping it easy and simple here. Basically, use of force is overcoming resistance through physical, chemical, electrical, or a projectile means, right? For the most part in corrections, we use chemical agents, we use tasers, we use batons, and we use physical strengths and holds. Not too often with the firearms, but that could be part of the whole penumbra as well. So anyway, as far as de-escalation goes, de-escalation is everything that happens up to that point, right? And for the most part, that involves our verbal skills and being able to talk an inmate down from doing something, to stop him from an assault, to stop him from maybe hurting himself, to stop him from doing all sorts of different things. And that runs the whole gamut too.
You know, we had a great discussion before, and we talked about, is use of force a last option? And how, you know, during this discussion, you brought to mind that it's like, you know what? It's not even about if all else fails that you go to use of force. Sometimes use of force is needed because you may have to have that aggressive response because maybe the de-escalation can make us vulnerable. And I totally understand that. And also sometimes management pushes for those other options. So before use of force was used, people may be asking questions like, well, could this have been de-escalated? Could this have been brought down before any type of force was employed? And I think because the way the environment is, the temperature out there, people wanting that de-escalation, because again, the use of force is ugly. It's not pretty. It's just not pretty. So people don't want to see that, but they don't realize that actually it's needed. It's needed because, again, you got people that are being resistant and you have to get aggressive. Again, professionally. We're not talking about we're going in beating up inmates. That's not the case. We're talking about sometimes it requires a swift and aggressive response because of what could happen if the response is not swift and aggressive. But the first thing I want to ask you, Russ, is the mindset, Russ. If we have the mindset of people that are responding to codes to de-escalate first, as opposed to get ready in case you need that use of force, how does that affect them in being effective?
Yeah, that's really wherein lies the rub, so to speak. We have to be able to train our corrections professionals in a manner that allows them to make that split-second calculation and make that split-second decision, and not put them into a situation where they're hesitating or second-guessing themselves. They don't have the luxury of sitting back after all this is happening and being able to go, well, you know what, we coulda, shoulda, woulda done this. Maybe we could have done this other thing. Maybe we should have tried something else. When you're there in the moment and seconds count, the next best idea is only minutes away. So I think that in a lot of situations that I've seen, especially when I've been talking to people recently on the interweb, as it were, there's a lot of push for de-escalation when it's clearly inappropriate, where it's clearly going to make the situation worse, or where the only actual solution at that point in time is deployment of the use of force.
Yeah, I like how you're mentioning that. Like, yeah, you want me to go ahead and de-escalate a situation, but at that point, if I go ahead and de-escalate it, the inmate's going to get the upper hand. So sometimes that mindset has to be, I'm going to go in, do what's got to get done because I got to get from point A to point B. And if it's allowed, if I can, if there's a chance where I feel that I can de-escalate but still maintain the upper hand, because I want people to realize something. De-escalation never gives that level of authority over to the aggressive individual. Like if I choose to de-escalate, I still have that level of control. I'm still holding on to that position of authority. I think some people think that when you're de-escalating, that you're actually compromising, and at no point is this a compromise. When you're inside of law enforcement, whatever it is, when you have that position of authority, you have to hold that position of authority at 110% each and every day. You can't even shift an inch. So if you're going in there with the chance that, okay, because at one point, I just don't want people to think that de-escalation is negotiation. De-escalation is not negotiation. There's not a compromise here. If you have a bunch of shit going on and you're responding to a code, and all of a sudden I come in to, let's say I come up with the mindset, I'm going to try to de-escalate. I'm not negotiating here. I have an objective. The objective is to get from you to A to B. I'm going to try to, give out my directives in a calm and controlled manner, because that's part of de-escalation, how you deliver those directives. But it doesn't change the directives. The directives are still going to be that you're going to get cuffed and you're going to go from point A to point B. And I think some people actually think that de-escalation is a negotiation between the people of authority and then whoever that aggressive individual is. And right off the bat, Russ, I'm sure, you've dealt with that too, where some people are like, well, you could have de-escalated. What do you mean by de-escalate? I mean, do you mean that I'm going to sit there and bargain with the inmate? Or do you mean that I'm going to go ahead and de-escalate the situation by going in there, putting the inmate down, and then doing what has to be done to get that inmate from point A to B. Because think about it. When people say de-escalate the situation, sometimes de-escalating the situation is literally by, handling the threat. Literally. I'm handling the threat, taking the threat where they got to go, situation is de-escalated. But I think nowadays people are trying to use the word de-escalate as negotiation or compromise. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And, I always want to, further define what I'm trying to say, because I don't want someone to, think that, I'm only about going in there with the use of force and that I'm about going in there and just, knocking heads together and stuff. That is absolutely what I want to avoid. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to avoid it at all costs, because I know that there's some things that only use of force can handle. And that's where we are at in corrections. Corrections ultimately is always backstopped by the use of force. Now, we try and do other things in lieu of that. We try and not go there if it's possible, if it's appropriate. But when we start, preaching a doctrine wherein, use of force is considered always bad, we've set up an unrealistic expectation. And with unrealistic expectations comes a lot of baggage. You start to hurt people that, used force in good faith. You start to make them hesitate. I don't want to be the one that makes one of my guys hesitate and then he ends up getting hurt. We also start to put people who are maybe less than understanding about the way all of this works in a position where they project what they think that they would have been able to do in that position, and then tell an officer he's in the wrong. And not only that, he or she is in the wrong and they're getting a write-up over it because he knows it could have been done better, because he knows how to de-escalate a situation. I've seen officers think that because they've taken a course in verbal judo or something like that, that they're going to be safe out there and that they're never going to have to handle a situation. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's the worst kind of projection that you can have, because inmates with their criminogenic needs do not operate at the same level we do. And when we start projecting our values on them, we become complacent. And when we become complacent, we're more apt to have to use force to get ourselves out of a jam and to save our own lives.
Right. And guys, I like what Russ said before too, because for us, we don't want to go in using force, but we're reacting to a situation that requires it. So I want to make sure that people get the understanding of that. Like, we're not just coming in guns a-blazing because we want to come in guns a-blazing. It's because we're being led to a situation where we have to react, and therefore we have two options. We could de-escalate or use of force. But the funny thing is this. What about if use of force is de-escalation? Like, why is that two separate terms? Because the funny thing is someone goes, did you try to de-escalate the situation? They're not talking about the individual. They're talking about the situation. Yes. When I came in, this is what we did to de-escalate the situation, which means that force was employed, and was able to get us from point A to point B. I think what people are trying to do, and again, just kind of going back at, what we were discussing prior, because again, it's constructed. This isn't scripted. I didn't know where this was going to go. It just came to my mind right now. I think, honestly, people actually are starting to define de-escalation as negotiation. I think what it is if I go onto a scene, I'm responding to a code, I have my team, I'm not giving up any level of authority. I'm not. I'm not. There's no negotiation here. It's my terms, because I'm in position of authority. I'm not giving that up to an inmate. I'm sorry. I'm not going to give that up, because at the end of the day, I'm going to put the facility at risk, put my peers at risk, put other inmates at risk. But maybe my effort to de-escalate the situation is using force. I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm not going in to negotiate. I'm going in to de-escalate. How? I took the threat, moved the threat, situation resolved. I mean, could you see use of force as de-escalation?
Yeah, certainly. There has to be a resolution to a potentially violent situation or a violent situation one way or the other. If it's through de-escalation, cool. If it's through use of force, that's fine too. I don't think that we should be saying things like, well, did you try de-escalation? When what we really mean is did you try and avoid use of force? Because we're not always in a position where we can know what the best possible solution is. If we were that person, then we wouldn't have this job in the first place, but we're human and we're fallible. So we have to be paid for our judgment. We have to be paid for the risks that we're willing to take. We have to be paid to have a good mindset so that we can mitigate those risks. And when the end thing comes out and we have to make that final determination, are we going to try and de-escalate? Are we going to use force? And it happens to go to that side where, yeah, we had to use force, or I decided that we have to use force. We need to be able to back those people up, give them a chance to justify what they did, not second guess, not Monday morning quarterbacking, not hindsight bias, knowing what you know now. We could have done X, Y, and Z. That's a ridiculous position to try and put people in. So what we have to do is we have to train, right? And by train, we have to train people to de-escalate. We have to train people to use force. We have to train people to think tactically, act strategically, and do their best as human beings and as the professionals that they are to, render that solution. And whatever that solution is, if they've done their best according to their training, we shouldn't be asking more from them than that.
Right, and if you read the definition of de-escalation, it says de-escalation refers to behaviors that is intended to prevent escalation of conflict. So, I'll give you an example. If I have a rowdy inmate and I'm just, I'm trying to go in with that mindset that I'm going to try to talk them down. In some cases, maybe, again, if it's secured and we're able to de-escalate, of course we're going to de-escalate. But let's just say it's a situation where I'm going in with a mindset of de-escalation first. That could put us at risk because I don't know if it's secure enough to de-escalate, right? So I should go in with that mindset that I may have to use force, but I could always pull it back if need be. I could always pull it back. But I think that you have to have that mindset that I have to be ready to do what's needed. And if the opportunity allows us to de-escalate because it's safe and secure to do so, I will. But if I go into that mindset that I'm going to de-escalate first, I could put myself and my team at risk if that's all I'm focused on and not focused on the threat at all. Because again, I'm just focused on de-escalating. But if you read the definition here, as I said, de-escalation refers to behavior that is tended to prevent escalation of conflict. If you think about this, though, you get an inmate that's acting rowdy, and as soon as I come in, maybe I can make the effort to talk, but at this point, it's really not a secured environment. I want to get this person down. If I have to use force safely, don't get me wrong, I'm not out to hurt the inmate. I'm just, person's being resistant. I just want to get the handcuffs up and get them moving. But of course, that's going to require a level of force because they're resistant. I would actually say that kind of goes with the definition here. De-escalation refers to behavior that's intended to prevent escalation of conflict because I'm not allowing the inmate now to take control. We took control because at the end, we're the ones that are going to get that inmate from where they need to be. So I really do think that right now the concern is going to be is that if we start training individuals as use of force is a last resort and de-escalation tactics are paramount, and giving them this definition of de-escalation that to me really is negotiation and giving up a level of authority or some form of compromise, I think that you're actually putting everybody at risk. I really do. And again, I'm not saying to go in like a beast and be aggressive, but what you're doing is you're having people going in just not being ready for that what-if situation. I mean, what's your thoughts on what I'm saying, Russ? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that thing that stokes the whole thing about, fears of what someone's going to say later. It's that whole thing that, that stokes the fear of, am I making the right decision? And while I'm thinking about that, I'm hesitating and I'm not taking the actions one way or the other. I've stalled out and, I'm up against that headwind that now I don't know what to do. We've created enough problems in, line staff's heads about what they should be doing, about how they should be deploying force, or about their tactics or whatever they're doing at that moment in time without adding to those levels. That's why I think, I would much rather see it clear that, de-escalation is good only when it's appropriate, right? Only when it's appropriate. And that the rest of the time you're going to have to resort to some kind of restraint or some kind of use of force. And that's just the way it is. We always wish that things had gone toward the best optimum outcome in corrections. But for the public or for management to expect optimum outcomes, think about that. You're putting a whole lot of pressure on an officer to always come up with that optimum outcome when you think about it. If that's what the standard is, and some people might say that, some people might, they might be on that bandwagon. Hey, that is the only acceptable outcome, is that optimum outcome. What have we done then? We've taken away a person's position to be human, a person's position to be less than perfect. And being perfect aside, or being superhuman, is not an answer. It's not a solution, because that's not the way the real world works. What we've really done is we've supplanted this with, you know what? I wish it was perfect outcomes every time. And that's what we've relegated them to. I think we need to, back off of that a little bit, take a good, hard dose of reality, and realize that sometimes things are just fucked up, and we're going to have to do our best to unfuck them.
Well, you're right. Sometimes when people review after incident videos or whatever it is, they'll be quick to ask, was use of force necessary, or were there options to de-escalate? I actually, believe it or not, I like the question better where they kind of say, was use of force necessary, as opposed to was de-escalation, or could you have de-escalated the situation? Because I think management that kind of asks is, was use of force necessary, is still putting the use of force as paramount. It's like, okay, so it got to that point where it had to be used. Where I feel that if someone goes right up and asks that question, could you have de-escalated? At that point, it's like, okay, is de-escalation a priority? Like, I mean, if I have to get the job done, which, in a prison, is not easy to do, is that mindset of de-escalation a priority, or do we have to really get our mindset to take control of that concern with whatever means necessary to alleviate the threat? And again, I'm saying the threat. I'm also saying that we're reacting. We're being pushed into that type of situation. And again, as long as we're able to de-escalate, like if I, again, just kind of backpedaling here, if I go onto a scene, right, I could maybe always slow down the team and say, hold on, guys, hold on. We can get this. This inmate secured in his cell. We have time to communicate. We have time to do what we got to do, right? But if I have an inmate acting out and I'm going in to de-escalate, I'm losing a lot of that momentum, that may be needed the moment I open up that door and I have to go in and we have to take that inmate down. I think it's better if you slow down the momentum if you're able to. But I think it's wrong if you're going in there with that mentality that you can go de-escalate, and then when you get to that scene, the momentum is not there. It's not there. Your mindset is not prepared to go ahead and do what needs to be done. But I mean, Russ, you talked about the priority of the mindset, correct? That priority should be, if I can get the job done, let's do it. Use of force if need be. But as a good supervisor, if it gets to the scene and maybe we're ready to do something, but all of a sudden, it's secured, we can de-escalate, it's better to slow it down as opposed to go in with that de-escalation in mind and then expect people to, to just jump into that momentum because, again, we were just kind of slowly responding to the scene.
Yeah, and all of that you've put out there right there, it begs the question once again about, the whole second guessing thing. If you're not there in the moment, if you're not the one directing things in that time, you should be willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. If they're staying within policy, if they're staying within, their training, if they're staying within, that balance of trying to shift back and forth between those two things, and you're the one to think that, hey, no, they shouldn't have done that. They should have done this. that or the other thing, well, you know what? Then pick it up and go down to the academy and be a trainer there, right? And you can decide that, you're the one to provide optimum outcomes no matter what the situation is. And you know what? You will undoubtedly find fame and fortune in yourself because no one else has been able to do it up to this point. So I think that we just need to, slow our roll, stay in that realistic mindset, and try and train people to have this balanced outlook and to be able to shift those gears quickly and to be able to not to provide optimum outcomes, but good outcomes where we did stay within policy, within procedure, and manage to, sort it out and keep things safe, even if it, God forbid, ends in a use of force.
Yeah, and I think obviously we know use of forces are never pretty, but I think people really start to need to get an understanding of why that's needed, because right now it seems to be that everything's about de-escalation, and they're really putting us in situations now where de-escalation is going to harm us. But it looks like the people that are reacting, the people that are going to save the day, they're secondary. No one's telling the bad guy, hey, you should de-escalate. You should, no, they're telling the good guys that are responding that we should de-escalate, but no one's telling this person here, hey, when the correctional officers come, do us a favor, de-escalate. We're always at an unfair advantage. Hey, Russ, you have anything that you want to say in closing?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I've talked about the management side of this and second guessing, armchair quarterbacking, and projecting their abilities into someone else. I also want to talk about the other side, because I've had a couple of interesting conversations with a couple of line staff recently, notably a couple of people that thought that 30 years and never had to use force was something to be proud of. And maybe it is. Maybe it is. Who am I to say? But I always thought, if you're in that position, you've never put yourself at the tip of the spear day in and day out and been willing to go out there and make the hard decisions. I went out there as much as I could every day, whether I was a supervisor or whether I was line staff, and put myself in a position where I had to make the hard decisions, where I had to figure out whether I was going to use force, whether I was going to de-escalate, whether or not I was going to, back off and, come back with more significant numbers to handle a situation, to handle the riots, to handle the stabbings and all these things. And I just worry about staff that have what to me is a skewed idea of reality, because that's not reality. Because if you're out there doing the job, you're going to have to use force. You're going to have to de-escalate. You're going to have to make the hard decisions. So don't think that because you took a course on verbal judo that now you can de-escalate everything. You can't. And if you think that you can, you're complacent. And you need to look at some of my stuff that I've done on complacency to see how you can blind yourself to real danger. And anyway, I just want everyone from this point, though, go out there, stay safe, be smart, think tactically, act decisively, and, best of all, stay safe, people.
Hey, Russ, I think we hit a lot here because, again, we're not condoning abusing the use of force. And obviously, we're giving credit to those who have that communication skill that can de-escalate when you're able to do it. I think the shift happened where, back in the day, we used to go to use of force first because we were looking to quell the situation as quick as possible. Because, again, de-escalation is great, but, time matters. If it's not done in an area where it's secured, de-escalation gives the other side a chance to plan, plot. And the next thing we're the ones getting injured because, we were concerned about using force, where we could have just ran in and did what had to be done and not put ourselves in a situation. Because I think when it comes to de-escalation, it's a great tactic, again, if the person's secured and you're able to do it. But I think de-escalation sometimes is they're really concerned about the other side, not the people that are responding. They're not concerned for the safety of the people that, may have the ability to get the upper hand, but now you're slowing them down because they're afraid to use force to quell, and that becomes a greater concern. So again, for people that are out there, understand that, we're reacting to a situation, right? And we want to end it immediately. And sometimes, yes, de-escalation is great if we can do it, but, if we can't, you have to allow us to get to that concern immediately and ultimately, hopefully move it from point A to point B as fast as possible. Now, I know, Russ, you have one more thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to, point to the fact that doing a video like this, it's always a little bit on the hard side because there's gonna be people that are gonna be on your side and raw. There's people gonna be trying tear me down, maybe a little bit because of it. But what I really want to do is I really want to not take the easy path here. I want to stoke the fires of a dialogue. And, sometimes just not going along and saying, yeah, we should always, 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 which is kind of, the company mantra, it's the corporational saying, the corporation's, mission statement. But I think we really need to bring this dialogue out and talk about it, because ultimately what I want to do is I want people to be safer. And so if some people are rankled by some of that and they don't agree, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have the conversation.
Yeah, well said. And for people that want to twist what we said, listen, I mean, you know us, you know who we are. Again, we're not promoting any form of abuse. We're just saying that you have to be ready in case it happens. And sometimes if you're more focused on the lighter tactic, you leave everybody vulnerable. And I think the one example I made clear, I think really works for me. It came my way when we were having that discussion where is if I'm running into a code wanting to de-escalate, I lose a lot of that momentum that I'm going to need to, if I have to be aggressive, I have to be aggressive, where it's better just to have that mindset. I may have to use force, but then when I get in, oh, he's secured, everybody slow down. And then go ahead, compose and have that time. But thing with de-escalation, guys, I want people to realize that when it comes to de-escalation, it's not a negotiation. That's one thing. People have to realize that it's a level of authority that stays with the person who is making that effort to de-escalate. And somewhere along the line, I think people have put they have more care towards the person who's causing the issue, and that's why it's the de-escalation first. And it's like, yeah, if possible, but if not, guys, let the officers do their job, because in the end, every second they go to de-escalate, that inmate could be thinking of something to do that could wind up causing the life of someone who was running to a code to prevent something, but we, tied their hands when we told them the priority is de-escalation as opposed to use of force. And that's pretty much what we're trying to get out. Balance it. As always, guys, the show is tiered. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. It's always going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.